every week on my Instagram, I run a Q&A with my followers. They ask me their questions about how gender equality and oppression is affecting them in their world, and I answer. If you join me on Instagram, you can take part in the Q&A, ask your own questions, get your answers, get involved. Thoughts on co-ed versus segregated high schools?
Yeah, nothing dries me up faster than the phrase old boys. Segregated versus co-ed schools, what do I think? I do not think that schools segregated by gender or sex should exist. And not only do I think they shouldn't exist, I don't think private schools should exist. And I also don't think any aspect of society should be segregated by gender or race or any other category. And in fact, almost all of our adult society is not segregated by sex, so why should it be okay for schools to do that? Now, there have been lots and lots of studies over the years about the advantages and disadvantages of single-sex schools. One of the biggest advantages that usually gets pointed to is that girls experience better scholastic performance when there are no boys present, but boys don't actually experience better school performance when there are no girls present. So effectively, the message is girls are better to have in a school. Nobody seems to talk about the greater benefits of boys' schools, which is less so on their education, but who cares about their education when the fact is boys' schools are basically a power factory or a boot camp to prepare boys and funnel them into the highest positions of power and influence in the country, and also to only share those opportunities within their network, which is just other boys who come from money and power themselves. There is some really compelling evidence that single-sex schools are actually really bad for young people. There was a 2014 meta-analysis that, among other things, showed that this type of segregation causes strong stereotypes and in-group biases, which if you're the person who's in like the least advantaged of the segregated categories, so if you're a woman, if you're a person of color, then you are obviously going to be on the pointy end of those biases and you are going to be strongly disadvantaged by those stereotypes and biases. Meanwhile, of course, boys and rich white boys and their dads want to keep single-sex segregated schools because they benefit from those biases and they benefit from holding power together and only sharing that power with each other. A researcher called Diane Halpern had some great things to say about this study. I will quote her. "Children are going to have to interact with females and males. They are going to have to understand that sometimes the girls are going to outscore the boys and that sometimes the boys will outscore the girls. After graduation, virtually everyone will work for and with females and males. Students need to learn mutual respect and the social skills of interacting. We don't have sex-segregated workplaces, so why would we have sex-segregated schools?" End quote. And I think that's really important to contemplate. And the other thing I just want to say is let's think about the kinds of messages that we send when we suggest that it is necessary to keep boys and girls separate from each other. We perpetuate the idea that boys and girls are fundamentally different, that they have different capacities, different strengths, different innate personality traits, and those almost always end up with girls and women getting the short shrift. And I'll end with one last quote by a researcher called Janet Hyde, who said, "There is a mountain of research in social psychology showing that segregation by race or gender feeds stereotypes." And that's not great.
Conflicted about International Women's Day. Like, sure, celebrate us, but is it just tokenistic?
Thoughts on International Women's Day? Okay, a couple of things. Firstly, I don't like the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And so if an awareness day is not everything that we want it to be and we can't undertake it perfectly, I still think it is worth doing it, even though, yes, definitely some companies, some organizations, even your employers can use it tokenistically without affecting any real change. My biggest actual concern with International Women's Day, even though I think it is important to have a Women's Issues Awareness Day, is that over the last 5 years or so, it's been completely co-opted by a private company, which has bought and paid for the SEO for the term International Women's Day and has bought the domain internationalwomensday.com. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization, by the way. And so when you search IWD, what you get is this weird private corporate webpage that has co-opted the campaign, but also comes up with its own campaign slogan that is not the official UN Women slogan. The problem is the private company that has bought like the International Women's Day domain usually comes up with a completely asinine slogan that doesn't do anything to address or call out the systemic or structural factors that contribute to or like fundamentally construct the disadvantages and the violence that women face. So for example, the internationalwomen'sday.com website this year has this slogan called #InspireInclusion. Like, what the does that even mean? What actions is that going to take? What is that telling people to do that will actually help to change the systems and the structures that disadvantage women, right? It's just like nice fluff words. The UN Women campaign, which technically should be the official International Women's Day campaign, is count her in, invest in women. Right, so it's actually addressing the fact that women are denied economic participation, that there is a gender economic disadvantage, and it encourages people to actually address and look at and learn about that particular issue. Most of your employers and friends are not aware that these are two different things, and so when they go to Google International Women's Day, they're just going to come up with this #InspireInclusion. They'll do some cupcakes at your workplace. They won't look at their hiring and firing and promoting practices. They won't identify that most of the women in your team are paid less than men who are much younger than them and have less experience. It's easy to be cynical about International Women's Day because it is very easy to be tokenistic about any particular social issue. I am disgusted that my own father can't prioritise my safety and feelings over patriarchy. This person wrote a sort of multi-question box. I've chosen to highlight this one, but they were asking about specifically their father dismissing their concerns. For example, when you get catcalled, men will say to you, are you sure that that's what he was doing? Or like, you know, are you sure he wasn't just trying to compliment you? And this happens all the time. Men are very much taught to no but women. You know, women are taught to yes and in that improv sense. Women are taught to listen to other people's lived experience and to credit them as being the truth holders of their own experience. Whereas men are very much taught to doubt women's experience and to deny it and to disagree with it. And this would probably be true even if they didn't also have a vested interest in upholding patriarchy, but it certainly is a two-pronged scenario. They deny your experiences of the violence of patriarchy not only because they've been taught to deny all of your experiences as a woman, because you couldn't possibly be the authority on your own experience, because you couldn't possibly be an authority on anything, but they're also taught to value and maintain patriarchy. Even if they don't necessarily know that they are consciously doing it, men are, I guess, subconsciously aware that they benefit from patriarchy. They benefit from men being thought well of. They benefit from men having good reputations. They benefit from men being believed and women not being believed anytime a man is said to have done something to a woman. So men could believe themselves capable of being disgusted by another man's behavior, and men tend to believe themselves as the hero and the man that would step in if a woman was ever being harmed in some way. But when it comes down to it, they're like lived examples that happen right in front of them, where you come home from a night out and you say, a man treated me this way. The men in your life will be like, well, I'm sure he didn't mean it, or I'm sure that's not really how it was. And you're like, well, I've literally just given you the opportunity to defend me and to support me and to, for once, see a man as a villain. And you have chosen to take the man's side. And that's the thing, right? Like, men will take the side of a man they don't even know over taking the side of a woman they care about. And that's because patriarchy teaches men to value solidarity with other men and value the opinion of and the respect and allegiance of other men more than anything else in the whole world. And women they come to exploit for our labor and our service, but at the end of the day, they will remain in allegiance with men. And that's what's happening with your dad. And he probably doesn't even realize he's doing it. And I think if you are going to maintain a relationship with him, because that's what you asked how to do this and not be estranged, I think you're going to have to start calling it out. And you're going to have to start
reflecting his statements back to him in a way that can help him to understand how insulting they are, how they make you feel unsafe, how they make you feel diminished, how they are diminishing you, how they are making you unsafe, and how attitudes like his do make women unsafe. That's it for this Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. Find me on Instagram at summertothill. That's summer with an O, spelt the same way as you see in this YouTube channel. I can't wait to see you there.